just beginning this interview, before we go into your candidacy for New York City Council, I have to ask you a question. I would like for you as a community leader to respond to what happened last week at the Capitol. You're somebody who's running for council. If you were elected in it, this is something that we would be discussing as well. What are your responses to what happened with the mob attack?
I mean, it was scary. It was scary to witness something like that happening in this country. You know, our family and our communities came to this country because we didn't think that we would have to be so worried about every single moment that our safety was under attack. And now it feels like nothing is safe. Nowhere you go, no matter what you do, you feel like you're always a target. And the fact that people were doing whatever they wanted, it was scary, so I think my initial reaction was shock, but it felt as if it was something that has been brewing for a while. This presidency that Donald Trump has created, and he's allowed for this to continue. He's allowed for people to do whatever they want and for white supremacy to be normalized. It is not okay that there were people wearing Camp Auschwitz shirts. The Holocaust happened. 6 million Jews were killed. And the fact that there are people running around with Confederate flags, none of this is okay. It is scary, it is shocking, but also what we have to understand is this is the America we live in. So we shouldn't be shocked by it. What we need to do is understand that it is the America we live in and that we need to change it. We need to make sure that this is an America that accepts people from all over the place. This is the America that we want to build, past. I can't believe that we're still, we still have people walking around with the Confederate flag and trying to defend it. It's just it's an unfortunate situation, but it is why it's so important that we make sure that we don't just pay attention to what's happening on a federal level, on a national level, but what's happening within our local politics, what's happening in your city, what's happening in your state. Those things have an even bigger impact. When you elect the right leaders, they will be the ones that will help manage how you access healthcare. They're also the same people that will help understand what's happening with your budget in your city. Right. So I think it's even more important and even more eye-awakening. No matter how exhausted you are of what's happening nationally, pay attention to what's happening locally.
What should be the local and state response to this? We're hearing about more of these demonstrations to come as soon as we get closer to the inauguration. You're somebody that's running on the local level. What do you think needs to be done?
Well, we need more of our community leaders to step up, right? We need next year in city council, we're going to be electing 35 new city council members. Wow. There's 51 city council members right now, right? And 51 that represent all of New York City. We're going to be electing 35. Imagine what the impact will be of 35 new elected officials in New York City politics alone. And we're also electing a new mayor. So I think the most important thing that we can do is pay attention to the people that are running for office right now, because in the next year, they are going to be the people representing you. They are going to be the people that are going to make decisions on what happens with our city's budget. So I think more important than anything else is paying attention to what's happening in your neighborhood, on your block, in your community, because that is what's going to be essentially what's going to affect your life. And, as we get closer to the inauguration, we can't just keep remembering that we have to protect our Congress and our Senate. We also have to protect our local politics. And again, I just keep bringing it back to local, because you have to understand how important every single vote matters.
Right. And it's so important to actually understand what grassroots movement is, how important local, elections are in forming a lot of, constituents and a lot of work for them. Let's talk about the New York City Council special election. It's happening on February 2nd, and early voting begins from January 23rd till January 31st. I would love to know why and how a person who's been born and raised in Queens decided to run for city council, also being a small business owner. What sort of inspired you?
Well, I'm running in a district that I was born in. It was a district that I grew up in. It's a district that I went to school in. It's a district that I'm raising my kids in. And so I think that's like, for me, first and foremost, those were some of the most important reasons. But also because I realized that I was facing the same issues that my mom was facing 30 years ago when she had her kids, right? When she had her kids, she was still trying to figure out what school to get her kids into. I was traveling almost 2 hours every day just to get to a high school. I went to Brooklyn Tech and I grew up right around Queens College. And so that commute was kind of crazy, right? To the fact that we don't have schools that parents are willing to send to send their kids to within the district that are as comparable to Brooklyn Tech, Bronx Science, or Stuyvesant is crazy to me. The fact that parents have to send their kids or resort, to sending their kids so far away is not okay. We need to make sure that we have enrichment programs for kids. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in community centers, right? So I grew up going to a community center called Pomnock Community Center, where I used to take gymnastics classes, taekwondo, dance. And these were classes that had a huge impact on my childhood. And had that community center not existed, I wouldn't have been able to have access or exposure to that. But because this community center was here, I was able to. But that community center only has homework help now. So it's lost its funding for all the programming that it actually was giving to the amazing children of this district. So again, it's really, really important that we think about investing in our communities. And so if I'm facing these issues, I'm just talking about education, access to healthcare, access to transportation. The fact that this district is still so inaccessible. I was talking to someone that lives here who said it was faster for me to get to Manhattan to meet someone than to actually meet someone within Queens. And the main reason for that is because transportation isn't accessible. Right? We don't have enough bus lines or frequency of bus lines or trains in this district or in Queens in general. So these are just a few of the hundreds of reasons that I'm running. But, I grew up here. I know it well. I want to represent every single person here, every single community, and bring them together, bridge the gaps between our communities and come together so that we can understand and empathize with what's happening on the other end.
Definitely. There's so much happening on the other end right now, especially with the pandemic. On your website, you have stated that the pandemic has further exacerbated the inequality in District 24th. What kind of inequalities are you referring to?
Well, I mean, it's things like housing, right? I mean, if you think about affordable housing, what does that mean? Affordable housing is it just doesn't exist. Every single person you talk to, again, I'm on phone calls every single night talking to voters because if I don't understand their pain points, I don't understand what's actually happening. And one of the conversations that my husband and I are constantly having is being able to balance, paying for childcare and for a bigger apartment. The fact that we even have to have this conversation just shows you that affordable housing is an issue, not just for us, but for so many other people. When new developments are coming into our district, what do we see happening? We see a small percentage of those nice luxury buildings having affordable housing. But the affordable housing is actually being calculated by the median income of people all across the city. The average person making, whatever their salary is here in this district is not the same as Midtown Manhattan or the Upper East Side. So how can you create affordable housing according to the, median salary of someone that lives in Manhattan versus someone that lives here? You can't. So if you think about what affordable housing looks like in this community, it's barely existent. People are constantly being pushed out of these neighborhoods. Rent. People have lost their jobs in COVID. People have gone food insecure because they don't have jobs. And so we're seeing more and more of these disparities that are constantly affecting people. And the fact that the eviction moratorium, it took so long for it to be extended, but it's something that is a constant scare that people don't have, a roof over their head.
Right.
So those are some of the things that we're constantly thinking about is just how do we make sure that we actually think about affordable housing and not just say we need more of it, but actually push for it and actually make sure that the legislation that we're introducing is something that's going to make sense to actually bring in more affordable housing for everyone, not just for 10% of luxury building units.
You just mentioned the issue of food insecurity. I know New York in general is dealing with a huge crisis when it comes to food. How intense is that in District 24th? And what are the needs that you're seeing the most with the diverse community that resides there? I know a lot of South Asians live there too. What are the issues you see them dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, food insecurity, you don't even have to do a survey. You can literally go outside of the line, outside of any food pantry, and you'll see how the lines are endless. They're blocks and blocks and blocks. You know, my company that I started called Food to Eat, we were a corporate catering service where we used to work with immigrant women, minority-owned restaurants to, get them catering jobs at large corporate offices.
Right.
But when the pandemic hit, we immediately pivoted into helping communities get fed because we knew people were losing their jobs. We knew they were going food insecure. So what we did was we focused on solving the problem of helping, small businesses by buying meals from them and then taking those meals and then delivering them to food insecure neighborhoods, working with community organizations like Womankind, working with Queens Community House at the Pomona Community Center, and, talking to them about what are their needs, what do they need. During Thanksgiving, we donated turkeys to them because, our job is to make sure that we're helping support the pantries, do the work that they're already doing, and help bring more joy into the communities, right? Like, it's not just about giving out a meal. It's making sure that when they take those meals home, they're bringing an immense amount of joy to their families. And it's something that's going to have to continue, right? Like, we need help from our federal government. These one-time $600 checks aren't going to cut it. Like, that's not going to help pay for rent. That's not going to help pay for childcare. That's not going to help, if you don't have a job, it's barely going to cover a small portion of your bills. So food insecurity is one part of the problem. We need to make sure that as people that are going to be joining city council, that we're going to think about job creation, that we're going to think about training people, and that we're going to try to give people a real pathway to get back on their feet, to be able to support their family with dignity. It's not just about giving people a handout. It's making sure that people feel good about where they are in their life. And that's most important to me as an individual, but also as someone who's looking to represent this community. So Food to Eat, my company that I started, we raised $130,000 on our own. We did partnerships with World Central Kitchen. We fed over 100,000 meals last year.
Yeah.
And that was all through partnerships we created, all through the money we raised. And that's what I think is really important when I think about, what a vote means for me, is that I'm not trying to do things on my own. I'm trying to bring people together, work with local organizations that are already doing the work, and support the community leaders, the community centers that are doing the work, so that they can actually continue to be the people that people come to, right? The community center, if it exists, let's support them. Let's not create a new one on my own next door to them, right? I don't want to create a new company or a new nonprofit. I want to help them do the work that they're already doing.
Deepti, the economic ramification and the healthcare ramification of COVID-19 have kind of gone hand in hand throughout the year, especially last year that we saw. When you're looking at these ramifications and you're looking at what the local government is doing right now, do you think it's enough?
I mean, there's always more, honestly, that we can do. I think the most important thing is thinking about accessibility. And making sure people have access to, what healthcare is needed for them, right? So when I think about COVID relief, we actually just launched a new thing that we're doing. There's 24 days till election day, actually less than 24 now. But a couple of days ago, we launched this in the idea that we wanted to make sure that people were seeing us create and put out ideas that are actually going to be implemented if I am elected to this seat, right? So the first thing that we need to make sure that everyone has access to, especially when it comes to healthcare, is vaccinations and testing. We need to make sure that there are enough centers that have testing services available, and that vaccines are easy to access when it comes to signing up for them, but also being able to go to the centers and get them. So the closest place for me is about a 25-minute bus ride. I have to take 2 buses just to get to this one place. And I think that that's something that we have to think about. We need to create partnerships locally that create access points, for the people that live here. And you have to make it easier. You have to meet people where they're at.
Yes, that's so true. We have to meet people where they're at. Deepti, I'd like to ask you a question which I usually ask a lot on ITV Gold. We talk about the South Asian community and its impact and what has happened to it. Would you say that this pandemic especially has been unfair to Black and brown communities? Are communities of color facing more struggles as compared to others?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are, Black and brown communities have been on the front lines. If you look at the industries that we represent, we have been on the front lines in every industry, and we don't have access to everything that we need. We are constantly being taken advantage of, right? Whether we work in hospitality, the restaurant industry, whether we work in any small business, you name it, we are there. If you think about the taxis, we're there. When you think, there's so many people that have been working and putting their life on the line just so that they can feed their families. And we haven't been given the access to, the healthcare. We haven't been given access to PPE. It's something that we're constantly fighting for. And that's not okay, right? Again, and that's why we try to pay attention to those communities the most. I truly believe if you can't, you can't be what you can't see. And it's really, really important that we think about proper representation in this seat, in our communities. If we don't have someone that looks like us, that is from our community, that understands us, how can we have the representation we need? District 24 in Queens has never had a mom. It's never had a small business owner. It's never had a woman. And it's never had a South Asian person. And the South Asian community is growing astronomically in this district. And the fact that we haven't, we've had people run from the community, but we haven't had people that have finally been elected. And this is such a, important time that we think about what representation looks like. Representation is not just about what you see, but it's also about, we need diversity in thought. And I think that that's why I think, of myself as a great candidate, because I've been a small business owner. I'm a mom, a young mom who's literally dealing with remote learning and having to balance it all in the middle of a pandemic, thinking about having family members that work in healthcare and understanding what are the needs and necessities that they need, right? So all of these things are really, really essential. I mean, think about even the basic things. Like people have been advocating for halal meals in public education. We still don't have that. People have been advocating for Diwali to be, a holiday for school children. We still don't have that. These are two really, really important things that we can, any city council member can talk about, but they don't, because there isn't a South Asian city council member. There isn't someone pushing for it. Halal meals and Diwali should be two things that anyone can easily do for our communities, but they haven't. And this isn't something new that's been advocated for. So from the things that we need as members because we live here to members because we come from a different community and we want to be seen, we need someone that's going to push for those things. We need someone who's going to not just look at the South Asian community, but everyone. I'm not here just for the South Asian community. I'm here for every single member. And that's why, again, I spend my time everywhere. No matter where you are in this community, you are important to me.
But when we are looking at Black and brown communities, Deepti, a huge issue of racial justice has been there for a conversation since last year. My question to you is, what is your take on racial justice and how do you hope to bring it in your district, especially when you look at policing reforms, a huge issue for New York right now? How are you looking at it?
Well, City Council manages the budget. What we need to do is make sure that we are looking at that budget and making sure that the budget is going in where we need it to, right? What I talked about earlier is reinvesting in our communities. Our community does not have community centers. We don't have job training. Where's all of that money? It's stashed away in the NYPD budget. And so we're in a deficit. Where do people expect this budget to come from, right? We need to make sure that we're reinvesting, we're holding police accountable. We're not just allowing them to do what they want, when they want, wherever they want. We need to hold them accountable. We need to make sure that not all 911 calls are being responded to just by the cops. I was talking to a Queens College student a few months ago who said he was having a panic attack and he called 911 hoping that someone was going to come to help him. A medical professional, but who came? the cops did, and they handcuffed him. Is that what we want to see happening when someone is having a panic attack during finals and college? It's a complete normal reaction, but he just needed help. And he didn't get that. What he got was being handcuffed, and it made the situation even worse. So we need to make sure that the police budget is going to people that can actually handle certain situations. We need to invest in mental health. We need to invest in social services. We need to train people so that they actually understand who they're dealing with when they're being called for an emergency. No, we can no longer allow things to just keep happening in the way they've been happening. We need to make sure that we're being practical about the solutions we create, and we need to reinvest in our communities. We need to have good education. Like, we need to have great resources for, children in our communities, because if they don't get access to the things that are important to them, the things that are going to help shape them and help shape their futures, like giving them dance classes. It sounds so simple, but it is so meaningful to every single person in this community. So again, when I think about police reform, I think about how we need to change the way things happen, how we respond to things, and how we really think about what policing looks like in the future.
Yeah, and hopefully law enforcement could be educated enough where we could raise awareness about their communities to them. I think that would be a huge help. You just mentioned education. Education is kind of in crisis. It has been in crisis since last year because of half going virtual, half in person, hybrid settings. How will you ensure that every child in your district, 24th, will have all access and resources to internet or other resources needed for education?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it goes back to looking at the money. You have to follow the money. I've been a business owner. I understand how, you have to look at your balance sheet. You have to understand how it works, and you have to see where you have to invest your time and money. So looking at the DOE, looking at the budget, understanding where our schools are spending their money, and making sure that we have access to the devices they need. I'm on the PTA of my son's school, PS201, and it's the same school I went to. And I talk to the principal on a regular basis. I try to understand what their needs are. And it's bridging the gaps of miscommunication, making sure that the principals have access to what they need, the parents have access to what they need. We're constantly thinking about how we can have more training programs for the parents to provide support for them, because a lot of the times as working parents, you're not there to be a part of the remote learning process. You have a grandparent watching the kid. You have maybe someone you've hired to watch the kid. And sometimes they don't even understand how the technology works. So that's why we're looking at ways in which we can support the parents, the caretakers, the family members that are watching the kids while the parents are working. The most important thing is, again, following the money, looking at the budget, supporting teachers, supporting parents, and supporting the principals and the school environment so that they actually know that they have someone looking out for them. And so those are the things that I think about, is looking at the way the budget is, asking the questions that nobody's asked, because I am hearing horrendous stories about how the DOE actually has the budget. But a lot of the times it's the fact that no one is holding them accountable and that no one knows where that money goes.
Just talking about the budget, and I'm not sure if you'll have an answer to that, Deepti, how much monetary help is needed in District 24th right now?
So I don't have that answer right now. And that's something that, I would, there's a lot of things that I think we can think about when it comes to where do we need investment.
Right.
It's honestly taking a look at every single layer of the things that are missing, and then kind of going back to what budget is going to actually help fix those things.
Yes, definitely. I just have a few questions left for you here. One of your greatest issue is climate change. You have a thing called Climate Mobilization Act. I would love for you to discuss that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Climate Mobilization Act is really honestly taking a look at, it's really amazing because it actually helps bring in jobs, which is something that when we think about COVID relief, we need to think about creating jobs and training people. So it's basically retrofitting all, both old and new buildings so that we can actually have buildings that are in line with climate change, right? In line with what we actually need to see happening, so that we're not worried about what's going to happen to the planet in the next 20 years. So the Climate Mobilization Act, the most important thing I can say, if you want to listen to anything that comes from this, is that it helps create jobs while making sure that the planet is being taken care of. And the most important thing is that in order for these jobs to come about, we need to also train people. So another thing that we also have to think about, when we think about city council, is how are we going to train folks to be able to have access to these jobs?
Deepti, what has been your single most challenging aspect of this campaign run?
I don't know that I've had a really big challenging. I mean, we've done well on fundraising. The most important thing for us right now is voter contact, and talking to people. The minute we're on the phone, the minute I'm in front of someone, um, I'm able to convince them why me and why now. I would say the biggest challenge, I guess, if I had to pick one, was having to run as a candidate in the middle of a pandemic, right? You want to be responsible. You want to make sure that you're not making anyone feel uncomfortable, especially when, you have to keep distance, when you have to constantly wear a mask, and when they can't actually see who you are or recognize you. So the one of the hardest things has been that is like, not only is it hard to be a candidate in general, but the fact that you're running in a pandemic, in a special election with a completely new system of voting called ranked choice voting.
Right.
Another thing that is really, really important that I hope that if everyone is listening, they have at least heard about ranked choice voting. And what ranked choice voting means is that this year, for the first time ever in New York, you will get to, essentially rank 5 candidates from 1 to 5. So just make sure when you are looking at your ballot that you rank at least 5 people on the ballot. You put your first choice first, and then you rank the rest. Ranked choice voting is such a great way to get new candidates in the door. It's a great way to avoid runoffs and cost more money to the city. And just overall, just a good environment for candidates to look at each other and collaborate with each other.
Definitely. And ranked choice vote, we'll be talking a lot more about it on ITV Gold as further we go into these elections. When you're looking at the South Asians that live in Queens and the Indo-Caribbean community as well, what's something that you'd like to tell them right now through our network about you and why they should choose you?
Like I said before, this district has never had a mom. This district has never had a woman. This district has never had a small business owner, and it's never had a person of color. So if we want to think about what representation means, it means that you need someone that's actually going to listen to you and understand the issues that you're going through and push for them and fight like hell. And I am more than willing to do that. I have built 2 businesses that were built to represent immigrant women and minorities because they've always been underserved and overlooked. And I am understanding how that actually happens in politics constantly. We need someone that's going to listen to every single person. We need someone that's actually going to spend the time to understand the issues and push for them. And as someone who has built something from the ground up twice, I think it's important that we think about what that means when you bring it into government.
Well, it was amazing having you here with us, Deepti. Just one last question for you. How do you want the community or ITV Gold viewers to help you with this campaign?
So the best way to help us is find us online. I am at deepti4newyork.com. That's DeeptiForNewyork.com. And on all social media handles, I am Deepti NYC. Please find us. We are always looking for volunteers. If you want to learn how our democracy works, getting involved on a campaign is probably one of the most important things. It was one of my favorite things that I did in college. I worked on a number of campaigns. So please, please, please definitely reach out. If you like what you've heard today, reach out to us. I'm Deepti Sharma.
And of course, wouldn't you like to tell them to make sure and vote this year?
Absolutely. That goes without saying. If you don't show up, your voices will not be heard. If you don't show up, our communities will not be funded. And if you don't show up, we will not be seen. So we need to make sure that we show up in numbers. Sitting at home isn't going to change anything. You can, if you feel uncomfortable to go in and vote in person, you can get your absentee ballots. I think the last date is the 26th to request one. So make sure you go online, get your absentee ballot, or vote in person early, or you can vote on election day. And you can find all the information on our website.
Definitely. Well, Deepti, it was a pleasure having you here. Good luck with your run.
Thank you so much.
Of course.